Hey everyone, and welcome back to Deepsearch Labs Political Briefs. James here, your host, hoping you're all doing well today. We've got a lot to unpack today. Specifically, we will be discussing the recent escalations in the Israel-Iran conflict. Thankfully, a ceasefire has been reached. It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it? So let's dive right in. Remember those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities? Well, in response, Iran launched ballistic missiles towards Israel. They weren't shy about issuing retaliatory threats. These threats were against the United States. The Revolutionary Guards even claimed they hit sites used by Israeli warplanes. Big stuff. Iran warned the U.S. that it would be held responsible for Israel's attacks. They also threatened to bomb U.S. bases if their nuclear sites were hit again. They didn't stop there. They also threatened U.S. bases in the Middle East. They even hinted at potential attacks on U.S. forces in Syria. Talk about upping the ante. They vowed a harsh blow to both Israel and the U.S., adding fuel to the fire. They refused UN inspections of the damaged nuclear sites. They cited the UN's response to the initial strikes as the reason. All this while maintaining their nuclear program is, quote, peaceful. Now let's rewind a bit to June 13, 2025. That's when Israel initiated strikes against Iran. The stated goal of these strikes was to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities. U.S. officials apparently were already concerned about Israel gearing up for such a move. Then on June 22, 2025, things took an even more dramatic turn. The United States launched airstrikes against nuclear sites in Iran. They acted in support of Israel. Boom. This U.S. action really intensified the conflict. It turned the conflict into a war. Israel, the United States, and Iran were involved in it. Naturally, Iran responded with missile attacks against Israel. They also warned that any U.S. intervention would risk an all-out war. They threatened to target U.S. interests in the Middle East if the U.S. sided with Israel. So, what were the effects of all this on the United States? Well, economically, we saw investor fears and rising gas prices. Politically and diplomatically, things got incredibly complicated. The U.S. had to ramp up its military posture, and there was a very real risk of a broader regional conflict. Now, shifting gears slightly, U.S. intelligence had indicated that Israel was preparing to strike Iranian nuclear sites. They could launch an attack in less than 7 hours. Can you imagine the tension? This intel led to U.S. concerns that Israel might strike without warning. This is especially concerning during ongoing diplomatic efforts. So the U.S. warned Israel against attacking Iran's energy or nuclear infrastructure. It kept the lines of communication open with Israeli officials. There were also differing assessments of Iran's nuclear program. Israel claimed Iran was close to having a nuclear bomb. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence suggested Iran hadn't yet decided to weaponize its program. They also suggested that Iran was further from producing a deliverable weapon. The U.S. anticipated the strike. It even noted Israel's drawdown of military personnel in the Middle East. Additionally, it noted Israel's drawdown of diplomatic personnel in the Middle East. It's like something out of a movie, isn't it? Of course, the United States supported Israel in this conflict in more ways than just direct military strikes. They consistently condemned Iran's actions through diplomatic channels like the UN. They worked on building international coalitions. They tried to de-escalate tensions through mediation. Economically, the U.S. imposed heavy sanctions on Iran. At the same time, it provided financial assistance to Israel. This assistance included military aid. It also included counterterrorism financing. Plus, there was intelligence sharing, cybersecurity assistance, and missile defense systems like Iron Dome. While publicly distancing itself from some Israeli actions, the U.S. provided crucial support. This support included military assistance, intelligence, and weaponry. It also included defensive assistance, such as helping to shoot down incoming missiles and drones from Iran. These actions naturally varied in intensity. The variation depended on the political climate. It also depended on the level of tension between Iran and Israel. So the million-dollar question, did these attacks stop Iran from manufacturing a nuclear bomb? Well, it's complicated. Some sources suggest the attacks aimed to destroy Iran's capacity to manufacture a bomb. Others suggest the attacks aim to diminish Iran's ability to build one. Still others suggest the attacks aim to degrade its nuclear weapons facilities enough to halt further production. Israel's military even stated the airstrikes aimed to degrade Iran's ability to build nuclear weapons. One assessment indicated that Israel had already delayed the possibility for Iran to have a nuclear bomb. The delay was for at least 2 or 3 years. But other perspectives suggest the attacks might not have achieved this goal. They could even accelerate Iran's nuclear ambitions. Some analyses propose that the outrage at the Israeli attack could lead Iran to take drastic measures. These measures could include rushing to develop a bomb. Alternatively, Iran could risk never having one. There's a real risk that Iran's regime will survive. If it does, it will accelerate its race towards building a nuclear bomb. It may even test it. It's also suggested that Israel's campaign, intended to stop a bomb, may instead end up accelerating its creation. This could happen if Iran exits the NPT. In that case, Iran could advance its nuclear program without international constraints. The likelihood of Iran trying to secure a nuclear bomb is considered much higher. This is to deter future Israeli attacks. And it's also possible that the U.S. attack could cause Iran to activate efforts to build a nuclear bomb. Some sources even question whether the strike has ended Iran's nuclear aspirations. They also wonder if it will spur Iran to pursue the bomb. It's a real mixed bag, isn't it? And let's not forget the differing views on Iran's proximity to building a nuclear bomb. Some experts claim Iran is closer than ever to a significant milestone. They base this on the progress Iran has made in producing highly enriched uranium. They say Iran has enough uranium-enriched fissile material to potentially build a bomb if it decides to weaponize its nuclear program. It is much closer to being able to build a bomb than it was. Apparently, Iran's rapid progress towards a nuclear bomb prompted the Israeli attacks. Iran is nearing weapons-grade uranium. Israeli intelligence reportedly learned that Tehran was secretly working on weaponizing nuclear material. This effort brought Iran weeks away from being able to produce a bomb. Israel even claimed Iran was days away from a bomb or on the brink of acquiring nuclear weapons capability. On the other hand, Iran denies pursuing nuclear weapons. It states that its nuclear activities are peaceful. Iran claims that these activities are for civilian use. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and U.S. intelligence have insisted on this matter. They have stated that there is no evidence that Iran is developing a nuclear bomb. The IAEA has not clearly suggested that Iran may be building a bomb. Its chief stated that enriched uranium alone does not constitute a bomb. Some U.S. intelligence assessments indicated that Iran was up to 3 years away from being able to produce and deliver. This was the case when it was attacked. U.S. officials don't believe Iran had decided to make a bomb. While Iran's breakout time has decreased, this doesn't mean it is actually creating a nuclear weapon. It also doesn't mean that it is deploying one. So where does that leave us? Well, following the recent conflict, Iran faces a complex and uncertain future. This is due to the fragile ceasefire with Israel. The extent of damage to Iran's nuclear facilities is still being evaluated. The U.S. has struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Some assessments suggest that this will cause a setback of a few months at most. Despite these strikes, Iran's nuclear program remains under threat. As we've discussed, there's no international consensus on how close Iran is to developing nuclear weapons. Iran denies ever pursuing a nuclear weapons program. Discussions about Iran's nuclear program are expected to heat up. This includes talks about the state of its uranium stockpile. It also involves potential negotiations. Some even urge Trump to force Iran to completely abandon its nuclear program. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA, aimed to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. It is not currently seen as having conditions for restoration. And of course, if Iran is desperate to build a nuclear weapon, it would have to face a significant challenge. It would have to contend with a powerful American military. Militarily, Iran's forces have stated their readiness to respond to any act of aggression. Iran's military has responded to U.S. strikes by stating its readiness to take action against U.S. forces. Iran's retaliatory strike was more restrained than many had feared. Iran has reserved the right to respond to U.S. attacks. Iran's Supreme National Security Council has issued a threat. It warned that further attacks would accelerate the collapse of America's military pillars in the region. Iran has also built out its cyber attack capabilities. It is expected to use them in a way that would not trigger a U.S. response. Traders are closely watching Iran's next steps, especially any actions targeting U.S. forces or oil choke. Iran has a non-nuclear option to cripple the world economy. It could do this by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Such a move could anger its biggest oil customer. That customer is China. The Iranian parliament has endorsed a blockade. The final decision, however, rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Economically, the U.S. attack on Iran has raised fears about a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. This could devastate Iran. It could also devastate Iran's immediate neighbors. The U.S. strikes on Iran have triggered significant uncertainty in the energy market. Oil prices have reacted strongly to this uncertainty. News of the ceasefire boosted demand for risk assets, and oil prices tumbled after Israel agreed to it. The conflict's impact on oil prices is expected to be on the agenda for many discussions. China, meanwhile, defends its trade with Iran as legitimate and rejects unilateral sanctions. Internationally, Grossi has been in talks with both Iran and the United States. The Qatari Minister of Foreign Affairs hopes for a return to normal good relations with Iran. Beijing rejects unilateral sanctions and defends its trade with Iran as legitimate. China has called for stability in the Middle East. This comes amid economic concerns. Iran could close off the Strait of Hormuz. Nuclear-armed North Korea has maintained friendly ties with Iran. Iran has been among Russia's strongest backers since 2022. Europe is largely marginalized from the conflict, but this could change if Iran takes a dramatic new path. And domestically, daily life in Iran is being severely disrupted by the conflict. Many Iranians living abroad oppose Iran's repressive government. They do not want to see Iran attacked. They also do not want to see civilians harmed. There are questions about how brittle Iran's regime is. Leadership changes appeared to be underway. This is occurring during the period of the current emergency. The theocratic regime felt compelled to respond to U.S. strikes. It fears that a larger conflict could threaten its 46-year rule. Some even believe Iran's repressive regime may fall into the dustbin of history. Finally, the Israel-Iran conflict is generally characterized as an ongoing, multifaceted conflict involving proxy warfare, cyber attacks, and political hostility, rather than a declared full-scale war with a definitive conclusion. This particular 12-day period of fighting concluded with a ceasefire on Tuesday morning. Iran stated that its military objectives had been achieved. The ceasefire was expected to be fully in effect 24 hours after it began. It was viewed as a step toward ending the air war between the two nations. So there you have it, a fragile ceasefire, a complex web of international relations, and a very uncertain future. What do you all think? It's a lot to process, I know. Thanks for tuning in to Deepsearch Labs Political Briefs. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll catch you next time. James signing off.